What does anti oppression even mean? In this video, we will discuss anti oppression as a useful lens through which social justice can be practiced. Social justice practice demands constant re-evaluation of one's position. Social justice is defined variously by different social justice organizations, but its three non negotiable tenets include the provision of equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal treatment. The Center for Economic and Social Justice adds the additional clause of personal responsibility of individuals to ensure that social institutions allow for growth. Social power can be redistributed to achieve equality and improve access to resources in an effort to reaffirm human rights. It is also essential to acknowledge and respect diversity and the lived experience of individuals within these communities, since it directly affects their participation and inclusion in everyday interactions with systems and individuals. A key means to redistribute social power and realign imbalances in power is through intentional anti oppressive practice within social justice movements. The term anti oppressive encompasses the practices undertaken to resist the abuse of power in individual and structural behavior. The structural forces that marginalize particular social groups and require anti oppressive inquiry include colonialism, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, casteism, classism, ableism, etc. Although oppression is perceived as something that is external, the result of broad social structures, its impact can be quite personal and intimate. For example, it would be correct to classify an instance of Islamophobia from a manager to an employee as being a result of widespread xenophobia in India with the rise of pro Hindutva narratives. However, this classification does not account for the deeply personal impact such an instance has on an individual, their ability to perform at work, their willingness to form meaningful relationships with their team, and the fear they may feel in fully expressing their identity at work. On the other hand, an anti oppressive approach to building relationships at work would account for the power imbalance inherent in an employee manager relationship, the inequality and violence faced by Muslims in India, and even a decolonial approach to power sharing, while understanding how challenging interpersonal violence in such a relationship can be. At the same time, anti oppressive practice is also cognizant of how oppression truly impinges onto access to other fields such as healthcare, education, housing, particularly when practiced by those working on social justice. As an opposition of existing structural and interpersonal oppression, such practice is guided by the need to challenge inequalities at the ideological level. It is grounded in a person centered philosophy, the ability to link the personal and the political, or to situate individual experiences of oppression in relation to wider socio-cultural patterns of ideological inequality, an egalitarian value system concerned with reducing the deleterious effects of structural inequalities upon people's lives, a methodology focusing on both process and outcome, and a way of structuring relationships between individuals that aims to empower them by reducing the negative effects of social hierarchies on their interaction and the work they do together. The most important anti oppressive principle is that of critical consciousness or reflexivity, which requires that people assess their implicit biases that affect their collection of information and, in the context of social work, the relationship with those for whom social work is undertaken. In doing the work of anti oppression in your own practice of social justice work, the following questions can be useful starting points for us to ensure that we are actively addressing inequalities and centering oppressed individuals' access to just outcomes. So, the questions would look like: how are you including diverse lived experiences, ways of knowing, and expression in your work with the community? Are you developing the tools that you need to challenge your own implicit bias? And are you addressing it actively as it arises? How are you including or centering those voices that may not be in the room but are impacted by the conversation? Where do you have power in relation to others? How are you occupying space in relation to them? Are you using an intersectional lens to make sense of the multidimensional nature of oppression that certain groups experience? And finally, is your work able to mobilize for systemic social change or address systemic barriers? What are some other questions that you can think of while holding an anti oppressive inquiry of your work or your everyday interactions? Can anti oppressive practice remain static? Remember, the work of anti oppressive practice is dynamic and shifting based on the context in which you do it, and it requires an in depth learning and critical reflection. There are no one size fits all approaches to incorporating anti oppressive practice, and it truly requires you to continue to center marginalized voices, to listen, and to learn. You may not always have the right answers, but as long as you're able to ask the correct power critical questions using a social justice lens, you should be on the right track. I hope this video helped you better understand what anti oppressive practice means and how it can help us together further social justice. In the next lecture, we will talk about an anti capitalist lens to social justice. See you there.